Alright, so I just got back in from seeing Spider-Man No Way Home as of recording this video. I mean, I guess a lot of you noticed, but it is December 15th, so I've literally just seen it, saw it midday. That was the first available showing I could possibly attend, and this is my no spoilers review. I do want to just emphasize that, even though this is off the top of my head review, I like to pride myself in not giving anything away, so if you are being hyper vigilant in the best kind of preparation for not going in there knowing anything with regards to spoilers, you won't get any from me. This is more from, as a non-spoiler review is meant to be, vibes of the movie, my impressions, how I feel coming out of it. Did I enjoy it? Did I really enjoy it? Did I not enjoy it? Or maybe did I enjoy it, but you know, there were some things where like I was a bit like, and maybe it's a little bit of the latter kind of thing. So with that being said, I hope you guys trust me, and I hope you continue to watch this video, and obviously I'll be coming out with a spoiler one at some point. I do not know exactly when, but yeah, so let's talk from the top of my head. And I've already tweeted about it, so I just, like, little plug there. I do recommend following me on Twitter for, like, little previews, or just follow me in general. I will say, let's start off with the most positive stuff. I was very entertained. Like, I was really entertained, and it had some great moments in it, you know? Obviously, this movie is going to be filled with a lot of nostalgia, a lot of fan service, and you can already gather that from the trailers with, you know, obviously Doc Ock coming back, Green Goblin. There are obviously, you know, it's no secret about potential other characters that could be coming back, if you know what I mean. So when I watched this movie, and obviously from the trailers, the stakes are very big. It is the most, I would say, pivotal Spider-Man movie from the home trilogy, if you will. There's a lot going on in this movie that is needless to say with regards to Doctor Strange casting a spell and you know, just what world this thrusts Peter into. And obviously by the end of the movie, what does that mean, you know, going forward? How does this all resolve? And the performances by the people you would want to expect a good performance from, such as, you know, Tom Holland, Zendaya, or, you know, just let's chuck it out there, like Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. They were great, and I think Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, there are a couple moments in there where he really just doesn't feel like he's walked away from that set from when he was filming as Norman Osborn way back when in the Raimi films. If anything, you know, out of anything we've seen from Green Goblin before with him, there's like a particular scene in this where he just comes across so like maniacal, even after this amount of time, that he really does not only just land the hammer on the nail, he like smacks it in there, and it's great. Like I want to like show that to you. You can probably feel my energy through the screen here with how there's a lot of moments like that that are really cool. The same does apply with Doc Ock and the other villains like Electro, Sandman, Lizard. Obviously there are some, you know, I can kind of divulge this information, who are featured more than others. The most obvious one being Green Goblin, the most prominent. Compared to Lizard, you know, he isn't as featured nearly as much, so that's something to bear in mind. But what I do want to say at the same time, and I do want to kind of just put this somewhat disclaimer out there, and don't mistake this for me apologizing, because I'm not apologizing for my thoughts. It's just everyone like views films differently, so when it comes to subjective enjoyment, I've got a feeling that most Marvel fans will really find this through and through entertaining, especially with the fan service that they give, the nostalgia that they somewhat, I feel like they bank on quite a lot, if not a little bit too much. And sometimes that negates seeing a little bit of like the issues in writing where it flies over a lot of people's heads. That's not me calling people stupid. Sometimes people might notice it, but they just might not care for those things, like whether said plot moment that is explained adds up, or like what does this mean for that, or why is this skipped over, that kind of thing, right? That I see a lot of things like that when I watch these movies at the same time. A lot more so than what I even did like 3 or 4 years ago. It's just through doing this. As much as I found this movie thoroughly entertaining, and it was, that I can't help but say a lot of the moments in the story, if you think about it, and people might say, oh, you're thinking about it too hard. Well, that's fair enough to you, but like to me, this kind of bothers me. A lot of the moments, and I would say it is quite pivotal considering it is to do with the plot that is multiversal, how things are brought into this world, or should I say, how certain situations are resolved, if that makes sense. Why does this happen, or why can't another thing happen? It's not really, a lot of it just isn't explained. There's a lot of logical leaps, and obviously that can come across as contrived to viewers like myself in the audience. And the way to sum that up is more or less kind of, let's do this for the sake of achieving said outcome kind of thing. And don't get me wrong, like a lot of movies or TV shows, episode to episode or whatever, have this problem very, very frequently. And, you know, that, I guess that means, you know, Spider-Man No Way Home, that doesn't necessarily make an exception there. And that doesn't make it like an inherently bad movie. That's not what I'm saying. I really hope people aren't going to be like, Bobby, you're just a DC fan, Marvel hater. No. Like, just you wait till I get to the moments where I was tearing up. I practically let out a tear and it made my face mask get a little bit wet at the top there. So, like, you know, as much as I was unironically still really enjoying this movie, there are, if you are a bit more on the critical side, look a little bit more into the logical leaps the writers might take at certain times, or, for example, certain parts in the movie that they just don't bother to explain, where I felt like it warranted explanation. This movie does have quite a few bullet points like that I suppose we can get into in my spoiler review. But then again, at the end of the day, I do feel like the overall majority of a general audience of Marvel goes in a movie like this and just doesn't see things like this, whether it flies over their head or not. A lot of people don't care for this stuff, and they might just soak in, you know, consuming the thorough entertainment this movie still provides. And that is not to be taken away, because that's kind of what I like to do. I don't like to go too far in either direction when I review things. I don't want to become necessarily one of those channels where it's like, oh, contrive this, oh, how does this connect, because that actually breaks that, and this starts a chain reaction of how Doctor Strange, blah, 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 and this doesn't. No, I never want to become that. I like to also take into the part of what everything else achieved and all the other merits the movie has, and then try and find a nice medium, if you know what I mean. And that's such a hard thing to do when I feel like you have one foot on both sides of the fence of just like, okay, I see how this doesn't really make sense, but also, oh my, this is actually really, really cool, you know? So that's what I'm trying to tackle with here. But let's also talk about, this is where I don't want to get into spoilery details, but I will talk about the characters that you know in the trailer, right? But you can obviously expand upon your own imagination here with what you already kind of know is floating out there, so to speak. So with this movie as well, the way that was handled in Nostalgia, I think, yet again, you have two separations of audiences here. People who are just going to soak it up no matter what, and like they're really going to be completely dopamine hit with the fan service, and it'll be nothing but, oh my god, this is spectacular. Now, I fall into more of the audience of, oh my, I'm looking forward to these characters coming back, whoever they may be, you know, and I thoroughly enjoyed my dosage of that. I really, really, really did. We get some fantastic moments in this movie. You know, callbacks to previous movies from the Raimi trilogy, the TASM series, obviously, you know, you got Lizard in here. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, comes something that, once again, some people may care about and some people might not. And this is what I like to say is like a lot of remember whens, you know? In this movie, there were a lot of remember whens. This is like with this character or that character throughout. This is when it does get to the main chunk, obviously, because the beginning of the movie deals with the immediate repercussions of what happened at the end of Far From Home. But when we get into the meat of the multiversal things, when it obviously does the callbacks to previous movies, those previous movies' characters come in some way, shape, or form, and how involved they are, dialogue and stuff like that. There is a lot of homage to, or homage, whatever way you want to pronounce it, to those previous movies. But when you come to deal with remember whens, if you include a massive frequency of it, it does come across a little bit less tasteful at times, and that's the vibe I did get. I was, you know, don't get me wrong, I was excited to see this movie, and certain characters who may or may not crop up on top of the characters I knew that would be in it in the trailer. But when I was watching this, it did get to a point of where it's like, remember when this? Oh, hey, remember this line that was said by this character in the previous movie and is being said again in this moment? Now, again, some people may freaking love that. Even I loved it a couple of times. But again, the conclusion here with that is more the more it kept happening, the more it just kind of felt a little bit not so tasteful. And that's the only way I can articulate it. And it's going to be fascinating to see how people feel about that. I do feel like, once again, to reiterate, I feel like a majority of your general audience MCU fans will just soak this up. And don't get me wrong, I did a fair amount of soaking up of all of this fan service as well. But there comes a point of where it feels a little bit less, tasteful to include what I've aforementioned. And this then comes into humor. Now, MCU humor is a bit of an odd one with me, because I do like MCU humor. Like, I'm not going to pretend that I don't. It'd be stupid to say I wouldn't laugh at Chris Hemsworth saying something or whatever with Hulk in Thor Ragnarok, or Guardians of the Galaxy. They're some of my favorite MCU movies. So I'm not gonna say that I don't enjoy MCU humor. The issue for me, in my opinion, when MCU humor can be a bit problematic, is that in this movie, and I would say especially in like the first half maybe, or first quarter, the humor felt like there was humor, but I would say 3/4 of the humor in general fell flat for me. Now, obviously, comedy is completely subjective. A lot of people love the little quippy things and jokes in MCU movies, but I would say, and don't get me wrong, I laughed out loud a couple of times, but it wasn't really more than a couple of times, to the point of where the frequency, similar to that of the, hey, remember when, that kept happening? It was the same thing with the jokes, where some people were laughing. I was like, okay, fair enough, you're enjoying it, but I was just like, to me, really? Would you really find that funny? Like, don't you feel like they did this just a minute and a half ago? That's the kind of vibe I got as well. It didn't really suck me out of the enjoyment of everything else going on, with all of these other characters coming back, the severity of the plot and stuff. But it was just kind of another thing I felt like a bit dampening of the experience for me. But that is, I think, a formula that the MCU just isn't really going to change. But to contrast that, we've gone over like the remember whens of like the nostalgia and the comedy. What about the emotional moments? The emotional moments in this movie do pack a punch. As I said earlier, I did get teary-eyed. To anyone who might call me a hater for just not sharing your opinion, how can I be if I am emotionally invested in this movie? And that's to the credit of, as I said, the story, the actors' performances in those moments, and I was sucked in to certain moments. There are some shocking moments in this movie that I don't think fans will see coming. Even like as much discourse or theory crafting as what you've done, there is certainly some things that subverted my expectation that were not only shocking, but also kind of like sad shocking. I was like, damn, like, oh, and that emotional weight and the way it affects certain characters, and obviously Spider-Man, Peter Parker, for example, that first shot in the trailer with him in the rain, some people even thought that wouldn't actually make the final movie, but I was just like, well, why are you thinking that? I hope it goddamn does, because that's the kind of grade of, I don't need it gritty or serious like that all the time, but that's what I was looking forward to in this movie. So when it comes to like packing punch in terms of emotion, like that shot in the trailer that you're probably seeing on screen right now, that is definitely felt, and those were definitely moments that I felt were very Peter Parker, very Spider-Man, with the way it just affected the movie, the way it affected him. I do feel like one of the big moments will be controversial with the way it's handled in this, and I wish I could get into it in this, but I just can't, and I'm gonna have to save it for my spoiler review. It's a new, interesting take on things, is what I will say, and that will mean absolutely nothing to you until you've seen the movie. Yeah, I don't know how to feel about that one, and this is for those who have seen the movie watching this right now, you'll kind of know what I mean. But let's skip to my next favorite part, and that is honestly, I don't know if this will be a shock to people, but like, despite all of the fan service stuff, but yeah, again, I could get into more detail with that. With the nostalgia's great, and I'm not saying the movie was consumed by nostalgia and took away from a Spider-Man story, because with everything that came with those characters of nostalgia being involved in this, does propel Peter forward as a character, which I am happy to kind of report back and say. So as much as I enjoyed those moments, my favorite part of the movie was the end. Believe it or not, like the end. Because of where things are left off, and this is kind of what I tweeted, my favorite thing about the whole movie is where things are left off, and what this means for Tom Holland's Spider-Man moving forward. Now, you may have watched my previous Spider-Man video, and, it was a little while ago now, but Amy Pascal basically more or less teased that they are working on another 3 movies. with Spider-Man. And I talked about where things could go in college, and obviously that's the next direction for these characters in general, and what this can mean for that character. And the way things were left off in this movie, without giving anything away at all, it's what I've wanted for MCU Spider-Man all along. And I wish I couldn't like really stress that enough to you. Now that doesn't mean that those movies are going to be good. Like, I don't know, but like the vision and the kind of concept and canvas that they've got set up for Peter Parker's journey continuing. If you've had various issues like me with MCU Spider-Man, like, it's not for everyone at the end of the day, right? But you're still a Spider-Man fan, you like Tom Holland, you like the cast, you still like the movies for many different reasons, but it's still not to a T maybe is what you would like. I feel like, and I don't want to overhype this, I guess, but at the same time, if you feel like you're resonating with the vibe I'm giving off here, if you've had issues with MCU Spider-Man, well, what they do at the end of No Way Home with this kind of conclusion to the story, yet the setup of a continuation for Peter Parker moving forward, it really does address a lot of those issues, funnily enough. The end is like a really good tee-off point, you know, to kind of swing that golf club and just really try and go for the freaking horizon with it. And it makes me... and I was excited with that news of where things could go just in terms of theory crafting for the next 3 movies. But I was still a bit apprehensive because, like, are they going to do this? Are they going to maintain this? Blah, blah, blah kind of thing. But now it's like I'm excited for the vision they have for this carrying on. It feels like who and what Peter Parker and Spider-Man kind of should really have been for a while. Not negating the journey that's already propelled Tom Holland forward to get where he is now, but yeah, I don't know how much more I can explain this without saying anything. It's just, this is the Spider-Man I think a lot of us now will be a lot more on board with, if you had issues before, even if you enjoyed it, but a lot more on board with in the future in terms of prospect. So that's all I'm going to say for now. I've been rambling enough without obviously saying anything spoilery. So Spider-Man No Way Home, you know, I was thoroughly entertained. Just like with a lot of movies though, or MCU movies, I don't feel like they have the most sound execution with the way things are set up. Like, you could even say, for example, even from the trailer, it's like with Doctor Strange creating that spell, and then Peter Parker then, for example, just mentions, like what he wants to change, and then like he starts to reset the spell in the trailer and stuff. It's just like, why don't you talk about this beforehand? Something as important as this with this spell crafting. Do you see what I mean? There's a lot of things like that. A lot of things that come across, oh, well, that happened because obviously the spell had to happen to cause the train wreck of the situation that this movie has to deal with in terms of the multiverse cracking and blah, 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 blah. Do you see what I mean? There's things like that. So I feel like there's a lot of that, but regardless, for me, I still really enjoyed it at the same time. But I was still bothered by those things. But hey, we're going to have to wait and see, and I can get a lot more into detail with this in my spoiler review. I do think that a lot of you will really enjoy this, though. A lot of you will soak up the fan service in the best kind of ways. I am intrigued, though, to see if, how many people remain with fan service aside, if, like, their glasses aren't fogged up by that and they can maybe see some of the flaws in the movie. It's also going to just be interesting to see if I get called a hater for maybe not sharing everyone's, well, not everyone's, but a lot of people's opinions on, no, what do you want about? This was amazing, the best thing to happen since, I don't know. It's just what happens these days, isn't it, when you don't share the popular opinion. But we're going to have to wait and see, guys. But either way, like this video. If you did enjoy it, I'd appreciate that, especially if you got this far. Do subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos just like this. Of course, we have a spoiler review coming, but there's a lot of content coming out in the next week with Witcher and things like that. But other than that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you, fellow Spidey men and ladies, in the next video. Goodbye.